Thief of Sanity, those are the main creatures, but he is going bigger. He's got 9 Planeswalkers in his main deck this weekend with Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, Teferi, Time Raveler, Liliana, Dreadhorde General, and Sorin, Vengeful Bloodlord in various numbers. And as we saw when we watched Brian earlier yesterday, those Dovin's Veto in the main deck.
They're nice.
They were good. They were good.
I'm a big fan of Negate, and the Can't Be Countered came up a surprising amount in the matches that we watched yesterday.
God Eternal Kefnet will go into the graveyard. Austin Collins will draw a card. Did he find land number 3? And more importantly, blue source number 2 for Narset. It's a Field of Ruin. Well, it is land 3, and it is maybe delayed blue source number 2.
It's not a bad draw. I mean, you would ideally like an island there, but the Field of Ruin is disruptive for BBD, and will fix Collins' mana a little bit.
We will head back over to BBD now. Former world champion and coming off a Mythic Championship top 8 with humans is Brian. Had a fun conversation with him yesterday where, that wasn't the deck I think he expected to have his first Mythic Championship top 8 with.
Sure.
37 creatures, but, whatever works, right? He'll play a Hollow Fountain untapped and pass the turn back. He's been a mid-range player, a control player, sometimes even a combo player. Not really known for playing a ton of aggressive decks, but, again, whatever gets it done. As here is Field of Ruin being activated on Brian's Watery Grave, so both players are going to search up basics.
Punching up the deck list, I will also say it might be time for some more Field of Ruins in Standard.
Yeah?
Because I am punching up a bunch of deck lists that have no basics.
They are a little light.
Yeah, there are one basic.
Yep. Brian's Esper mid-range deck has an island and a swamp, and I saw a lot of Esper mid-range decks with one basic, like you mentioned. Skimping a little.
I punched up a Jeskai control deck this morning with 0. Would just be Wasteland against them.
Yep. Better than
Wasteland, right?
You get a land.
Keep your mana. It's just a free Stone Rain.
Let's go back over to Collins now, getting that blue source there for the Narset in hand. He's playing 4 copies of Narset, Parter of Veils in his main deck here this weekend. Felt that one was pretty powerful. It's looked pretty good thus far. Austin may be trying to resolve one now, and he will play Narset. Looks like Dovin's Veto is going to take care of that. Collins did draw a land in a swamp, so he plays another land and passes the turn back over to Brian. He's working himself out of these mana issues that he did have.
And there's no real way for Collins to play around the Dovin's Veto for the whole game. He's got just a bunch of expensive spells, so he's got to just power his way through it. Doesn't look good, but he doesn't really have an alternative line.
Yep. Brian weighing his options once again. Looks like Drowned Catacomb is going to be the land.
Catacomb. Nice.
Yeah. A Naked Hostage Taker will be the play.
Just so sweet.
Well, it might be better than doing nothing. Brian's got 3 main deck copies of Hostage Taker. Not ideal in this matchup. That's somewhat Planeswalker-centric, I would say.
Collins is a very serious affect at the table, but it looked like he was trying to suppress laughter.
Yeah. There's an Augur of Bolas.
But absolutely busted.
Take a look at the top couple of cards.
Put them on the bottom. All 3 on the bottom.
Austin consulting his hand while looking at the scry.
When Augur of Bolas enters the battlefield, be reminded of 3 non-spell cards that are in your deck. Then put them on the bottom.
Yes, ideally 3 lands. Perhaps 2 lands and a Planeswalker. The young man from Kansas City thinking a lot on this decision. And he'll go with Cast Down. Those other cards will go to the bottom of the deck. Don't know if he found land number 5 or not. He did not. And he'll pass the turn back over to BBD. Brian will draw. So we work ourselves into the mid-game here in round 10, our first of the day.
I had this epiphany the other day. I realized that the original Ravnica block was so long ago that I have become nostalgic for the old Ravnica dual land artwork. Hallowed Fountain in particular. The original Hallowed Fountain, I think, is one of my favorite. Probably makes my top 25 pieces of art.
Yeah?
Yeah, love it. Love that art.
Let's do a little compare and contrast.
Well, the more recent Hallowed Fountains have a very sort of angular feel to them, whereas the original Hallowed Fountain to me feels like something you would see in a city square, which is a lot of what kind of like the Ravnica feel is going for.
This will be Teferi, and in response, Collins will cast the cast down on the Hostage Taker. Teferi Time Raveler appears to be a very popular card here this weekend. The players that I talked to, and here's Thought Eraser on the draw step because of Teferi's +1, have really felt that this is one of the best cards in this set. And as we take a look at that new Planeswalker, we'll go over that in just a moment, but Austin Collins' hand does have Tyrant Scorn, Cry of the Carnarium, another copy of Narset, and the Liliana that Brian saw earlier. So he'll take a card and Surveil here in a moment, but the reason Brian can do this is because of the +1, which says until your next turn, you may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. So Thought Eraser is being cast as though it had flash to take a card from Austin Collins in his draw step. And then, of course, there's the return up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand. Draw a card. I know Shaheen Sarani has felt very strongly about this Teferi, but other players like Edgar Mayesh and Matthew Dilks also thinking that Teferi is one of the best cards in the set.
Well, I think a 3-mana Planeswalker that has enter the battlefield, draw a card as an option, it's really hard for that card to miss. Whether it's a staple or if it's, one of the 5 best cards or something lower than that, that's going to be, you'll see where that lands. But I think there's no way it misses.
Yeah,
there's no way.
Tyrant Scorn was used there for Austin to bounce his own Augur of Bolas.
And got reminded of 3 cards that are non-spell cards that are in his deck and put them on the bottom.
Straight to the bottom. Heading back Brian's way now.
Though, Collins' deck does not play that many spells for an Augur of Bolas deck. Mm-hmm. He's at 23.
That strikes me as low.
So, that's, in the ballpark of 40% of his deck. And look at 3 with 3 shots at a 40%er, you do miss a lot. That's not that weird.
Enter the God Eternals at instant speed. Super cool. So that's dead. Gonna do some milling, gonna do some gaining of life, make a 4/4. Teferi looking pretty good here. Get our white die out there for +1/+1 counters. As there's Tyrant Scorn, it'll bounce that. And we'll head back over to Brian now. Brian, no cards in hand. Just got that Teferi going. Well, it looks like he drew a good card. Might be another Teferi. The 5-mana variety. Yeah, good top deck there for BBD. He'll be untapping some lands in a moment, and he's, of course, got to use his other Teferi. So it's Teferi control here early this morning. And he'll actually use the minus. Play Glacial Fortress, untap a couple lands, pass the turn back. Austin with an island right off the top of the deck onto the battlefield. We head back over to BBD with his 2 Teferis. Plus the Hero of Dominaria, draw a card. Plus the Time Raveler can play his sorceries at instant speed. There's Thief of Sanity, untap a couple of lands, pass the turn back over to Collins, who now has to contend with a Thief. He'll start with an Opt. The top card will become the bottom card, so a mystery card coming here for Collins. And now he'll play Cry the Carnarium. That'll take care of the Thief of Sanity. That's something that Brian knew he had from an earlier Thought Eraser. And Now Teferi, Time Raveler will plus. Brian will play another Thief of Sanity. He's already drawn his cards, of course, with the Teferi Hero of Dominaria. And now going to put Collins to the test once again. You see Brian's got this mega mana advantage. Not really the kind of matchup or deck to take advantage of it like you'd see in a traditional control mirror, but it doesn't hurt.
No, and, you know, it doesn't, especially when you're drawing 3 cards a turn. It's
Yeah.
gonna have a lot of mana.
Here's Narset. And that will resolve, so it'll be a minus here on Narset. Take a look at the top 4 cards. It's search for his Kanta on a Planeswalker, more or less. Not a creature, non-land is what you get to take, so. Enter the God Eternals will go to the Grip, Swamp, and then Liliana in hand. So that's what Austin Collins is working with as we head back over to Brian. And BBD is going to take some time to analyze this battlefield. Looks like he's going to minus Teferi to take care of Narset. So tuck that away. Here comes Thief of Sanity. This is kind of cute because that actually takes care of the Narset now for good.
Well,
because Thief of Sanity takes a look at the top couple of cards.
Well, I mean, BBD can actually just play it, right?
Yeah, which is what he's going to do.
It's even better than that.
Yeah, now he has a Narset on his side of things. The Parter of Veils is now BBD's, thanks to Thief of Sanity. And Brian will take a look at the top couple of cards. Pretty filthy play there. And now he's got a Liliana. So now it's a Planeswalker party. Super friends indeed here for BBD.
And Collins just out here playing it out.
Yeah, that is true. I'm not sure how much longer Austin wants to try to work himself through this because Liliana is going to enter the fray. I imagine a zombie's on the way. But yeah, this isn't getting any easier. Brian just got to make sure he uses all of his Planeswalkers now. Austin will draw. Enter the God Eternals is going to be played. That's going to take care of Thief of Sanity. And so that will resolve. 4 cards will be milled. And perhaps Austin's just trying to get a little bit of info on his way out the door here by asking to see the graveyard. Smart thing to do from the youngster because it's going to take a lot to win the game. Does he have a copy of the Elder Spell?
No.
Okay. And Austin will concede. So, Brian Braun-Duin is going to win game number 1 here against Austin Collins. Esper midrange up a game over Demir midrange, as Austin had some land troubles and just didn't have a great hand that particular game, but Brian played his card excellently, as he oftentimes does, and we'll see what happens in our sideboard games. Let's start with those sideboards, and we will start with Austin Collins, who's got 4 copies of Dreadhorde Invasion, 3 Finale of Eternity, 2 Unmoored Ego, 2 Negate, 2 Duress, and 2 Disdainful Stroke. The good news for Austin is that his deck gets a lot better after sideboard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm into Disdainful Stroke, Duress, Negate, and the 4 copies of Dreadhorde Invasion. So a lot to bring in, and he can, you know, you don't want to totally bail on your removal because you saw Thief of Sanity, but you can certainly have less. And in exchange, you get ways to interact with Planeswalkers, which, as we saw in game number 1, they buried Collins.
For Brian, 2 Basilica Bell Haunt, 2 Davriel Rogue Shadow Mage, 2 Deputy Attention, 2 Dovin's Veto, 2 Duress, 2 Moment of Craving, 2 Time Wipe, and an Unmoored Ego, so a pretty diversified sideboard for our Esper midrange.
I think you'll see the Duresses, the Dovin's Vetoes, and the Davriels come in here.
Fair enough. I think pretty straightforward options. Again, Brian also has the ability to get away from some removal. I think this is the kind of matchup where Enter the God Eternals isn't good for either player.
I mean, if I was in Collins' spot, I definitely don't want the full 4. I might cut them all together. If he left in 1 or 2, I think that's justifiable. BBD, I would guess, is going to cut them all together.
And Brian can also cut those hostage takers, too.
Yeah.
Which I don't think are particularly good.
You got to be mindful, though. You know, it's very common in these spots for control players with very few creatures in game 1 to have stuff in the sideboard. So I don't know if you want to go all the way down to 0, but certainly you can confidently shave some of it.
Well, those are your options there for both players, and they will sideboard, shuffle up, and get ready for game number 2 as we kick off round number 10 here in Richmond, Virginia. We do want to talk about the StarCityGames.com weekly sale, where it does change every single Monday. We got hundreds of singles on sale through Monday, including History of Benalia, a beautiful Plains from not hinged, stable. Unstable, got there. Lightning Greaves and a Chroma's Memorial. Go to StarCityGames.com/sale for more information. And make sure you just bookmark that because we change it every single Monday with new sales all the time. We're prepared to get our eyes on BBD versus Austin Collins a little bit more here. We'll have a time-shifted match for you. Nick Miller's working on a pretty healthy metagame breakdown because we've got over 100 players in day number 2 of competition here in Richmond. As Patrick has alluded to, we've typed up all of our deck list here, so those will go live after round number 15. We make our cut to the top 8. For all of you that are looking for the information for War of the Spark Standard, as far as what I typed up, pretty diversified.
I saw a lot of mono red, and I definitely saw a lot more adaptation of pre-existing deck versus entirely new deck, but there were some entirely new ones as well. Niv Mizzet Highlander.
One of many.
Feather, plus spells that interact well with Feather, and others.
I think that Feather thing is, I'm interested to see what's going on there. I am. I think the deck's good.
I don't know about good necessarily, but it was sure doing a bunch of impressive stuff when it had Feather in play.
That's true. I hope it's not too reliant on Feather, I guess is what I'll say.
Right, you need sort of the problem is that Feather sort of presupposes you have to have a lot of spells that play well with it, and then how many creatures can you really put in your deck, and then do you have these draws where it's a bunch of spells and one thing, and if the one thing dies, then you have a bunch of cards that don't work.
Yeah.
You know.
That's my concern, but we will have to see over time as that deck continues to develop itself. And, you know, what's the mid-range deck of choice? Before it was Sultai mid-range with Wild Growth Walker and Branch Walker and Jade Light Ranger, but this weekend I've seen way more Esper mid-range.
I think the Planeswalkers are a big shift there. I think that Esper, blue-white, got the better of it in terms of the Planeswalkers in the set compared to, you know, the Sultai color pairings. And that's going to direct people more and more to playing with Esper or blue-white rather than Sultai or Simic or whatever.
The one card that just I haven't really seen cast that much this weekend, that when we were in Indianapolis in January, that really debuted and took over was Hydroid Crisis. We just haven't really seen any. It's hard for me to believe that card isn't still quite good.
Well, there's not a shortage. You know, remember when Karn got previewed? Sign of Versa, and I'm like, this is busted. It's not that Karn's bad. It's that they print a lot of ways for you to draw a lot of cards with if you're willing to spend some mana. And how much better is Hydroid Crisis than any Planeswalker you could play? It's not exactly the same thing, and there's certainly times where Hydroid Crisis is better than a Planeswalker. But if you're willing to spend 5 or 6 mana on a card and you're interested in drawing cards, it's not like Hydroid Crisis exists on its own plane. There are like 25 powerful cards you can choose from.
That's a very good point.
And it's just one of many. Same with Karn Scion of Urza. It's not hard to find, you know, how are you supposed to play Karn when they let you play with Experimental Frenzy?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or other 4-mana Planeswalkers. So it's not an indictment on Karn or Hydroid Crisis. They're very powerful cards. There's just a lot of competition for a finite number of slots. They all do similar things.
I haven't seen much Karn recently at all.
Right, it's like a sideboard card. And like, you know, Mono Red could sideboard Karn, and we see some Karns in some people's sideboards. But is Karn better than the new Chandra for a Mono Red deck?
Maybe yes, maybe no.
Yeah, right. It's not. So it's not. Again, it's not an issue with Karn being weak. It's an issue with there's just so many Karns to choose from that it's so unlikely that any specific Karn is going to be the Karn you play with.
Opening hands here, folks. We got Thief of Sanity on Brian's side at the very least. Austin Collins with those Nar sets that have been popular for him, and also has a copy of Dreadhorde Invasion on the play. So, for you old school players out there, which that's painful for me to say, who have seen Turn 2 Bitter Blossom be game over a lot of the time, I'm curious if that's the case with Dreadhorde Invasion. I think we might have the opportunity to try to find out, though Brian does have a copy of Mortify in hand now. Brian's going to play a Water Grave on tap and a Duress. Well, maybe
Never mind.
Maybe we won't find out at all.
Way to set it up, only to disappoint.
Yeah. Dreadhorde Invasion is the new enchantment from War of the Spark, very Bitter Blossom-esque. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life. There is no may here, and amass 1. You put a +1/+1 counter on an army you control. If you don't control one, you create a 0/0 black, a zombie army creature token first, and when a zombie token you control with power 6 or greater attacks, it gains lifelink until end of turn. So Narset's going to bite the dust again. This is notable because if you're Austin, you have to realize that Brian has an answer to this card. You're still going to play it.
Yep. I mean, Mortify is the most obvious.
Brian will play a Hallowed Fountain tapped. And Austin will create a zombie army, and it'll have a counter on it. So we're going to head back over to Austin now as he falls down to 19. Field of Ruin. Pass the turn back. Looks like it's going to be in the draw step that Austin's going to fire off the Field of Ruin and take care of the Hallowed Fountain.
So this is interesting. BBD's deck does not contain a plains, is that correct? He has an island and a swamp?
Let me confirm. I closed the deck list. Let me reopen it.
Great.
Yeah, I know.
Because if he doesn't play with a plains, this might be a really heads-up play here from Collins, trying to cut BBD off of the Mortify he was signaling by not taking the Dreadhorde Invasion off of that initial discard spell.
So I would agree if Collins did this when BBD was tapped out, but he's doing it on his upkeep.
No, I think he's draw stepping.
Well, either way, right? Brian can just go float a white.
Not into his main phase where he needs land number 3.
Well, so he has 2 lands. He has 2 lands. He floats a white. He gets his land from.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, he does. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so if Austin wants to do that, he has to do it when Brian's Hallowed Fountain is actually tapped. Now, Brian has more white mana, so everything appears to be fine. And he's actually just going to play Thief of Sanity, so he must not care about this Dreadhorde this Dreadhorde Invasion at all.
Well, it's the difference between Collins having a 1/1 or having a 2/2, and that just might not be a big enough of a difference for BBD to want to take a turn off of casting Thief of Sanity.
Now, Brian's basics, again, are an island and a swamp, so there is no plains here. Here comes the Knucklehead. It's a 2/2 that's coming across. And Brian's Thief of Sanity is still alive, and it is attacking, and it is connecting, which is bad news for Austin Collins. So those are the 3 cards that Brian's going to look at. And now there's the Mortify to take care of the Dreadhorde Invasion. So it is clear that Brian was not too scared of that card and saying, more or less, I can beat a 2/2 and Thief of Sanity is more important.
Right. Yeah, if you get Thief of Sanity online, then that's so much higher upside than whether or not Collins is a 1/1 versus a 2/2. Doesn't really matter that much.
Thought Eraser is going to take Sorin because that's the only option in Brian's hand. Brian's hand is full of lands, and then he's got a mystery card that he's taken from Austin. Dreadhorde Invasion will be surveilled away. And Austin may be deciding what land he wants to play. He'll go with a swamp and attack for 2.
Thief of Sanity is such a brutal squeeze in these kind of matchups because, you know, all your good sideboard cards are anti-spell, and you want to cut a lot of your creature removal because it's bad, and you're playing against discard spells, so it's really bad if dead cards are getting stranded in your hand. And then this happens sometimes. It's hard to manage all the different angles of attack here that BBD has.
Try to get a look what Brian's taken here. It looks like he's going to take Augur of Bolas, I believe. And he will. So Vraska's Contempt and a land went into Austin's graveyard.
Is reminded of 3 cards he has.
Yes, of course. It's funny, people think we're joking, but we've watched Augur of Bolas in its last standard format. Put him right to the bottom, folks. It's a little camera shy. Collins is going to try to resolve a Liliana. However, Austin, you gave him that negate.
Stop hitting yourself.
Yes, you gave him that negate. Thief of Sanity is a ridiculous Magic card.
I don't know. Not against the decks I play.
Sure, that's
I have
true.
not had
That's true.
this experience. I get humiliated in a bunch of different ways. This doesn't happen to me.
That's true. You're happy when they
Yeah,
play Thief
yeah.
of Sanity.
It's like, okay, well, that is dead, and I'll untap.
Narset among the options now for Brian. Yeah, that's a good point. This does not happen to you ever.
Yeah.
Brian has taken a Narset.
The other thing happens to me where, Augur Bolas reveals Vraska's Contempt. And I'm like, I'm not playing this one out.
I concede. I concede.
I can't even beat the 1/3. It comes with a removal spell. It's just rubbing it in.
Dovin's Veto, the selection there off of Narset, with the appropriate mana to cast it. Brian will play a Glacial Fortress, and he'll pass the turn back with access to the new counter spell, as Austin Collins will draw a card. This is a Thought Eraser to clear the path potentially for something. I think we're going to see that Dovin's Veto, yes. Collins will play a Drowned Catacomb and pass the turn back. His 2/2 can't even get through the Augur Bolas.
It's just so. I mean, this is excruciating.
In these mid-range mirrors, looks like maybe Thief of Sanity may be king.
It's like you drew your sideboard card. It was atrocious.
Yeah, your Dreadhorde invasion. It wasn't. Brian elected to not kill it immediately,
didn't even kill it.
Yeah.
Just all you got to show for it is a Skates zombie currently being held off by your own Augur Bolas.
Look, it's a tough way to go about doing it early in the morning.
Good morning. Yep. Yeah. Good morning. Rise and shine.
Thought Eraser, among others, going to go to the graveyard here. Brian does have a Liliana in hand. He's going to go to Hero of Precinct 1 now. Swamp. Thought Eraser, trigger. Disdainful Stroke is gone.
BBD's cast nothing that's cost 4 or more.
Yeah.
The whole game. It's just 3s.
This might be the clinic.
This is great.
Yeah, this might be the clinic. BBD is in his comfort zone right now. Brian will untap. He is in the driver's seat as he'll draw a card. Six mana? Looks like maybe Liliana. Yeah. Opt-in response. Top card becomes the bottom. Top of deck?
And remember here that Collins has to be opting on the opposing turn because of the Narset passive.
Yep.
Not that it matters.
Yes. Brian Braun-Duin going to win this match here against Austin Collins. 2 games to 0. Esper midrange going to shellac Dimir midrange. And oddly, I think that Dimir midrange, like we talked about yesterday, is probably quite good against the aggressive decks and mono red. But in these mid-rangey matchups, especially I think this one, I think he's a lot worse.
Well, it's there's a lot of cards in Collins' deck where they need to line up kind of in specific ways for them to be good. And BBD's deck, it's the mixture of Planeswalkers plus Counterspells plus Thought Erasers plus creatures. BBD has all these different dimensions, all these different angles of attack to go down. And there's so much pressure on Collins to line up the 25% of his deck that lines up the right way against the 25% of BBD's deck that he happens to be playing with.
Yep.
And that can be different game to game or over the course of several turns. And you can see BBD was always just doing good stuff, tapping out all the time, and Collins was really struggling to get his cards to just line up appropriately.
Yeah, they didn't line up at all in either one of those games. And that's why Brian Braun-Duin is now 9-1 here, while Austin Collins is going to slide down to 8-2. It's a 3-minute break, folks, here from Richmond, and then we are going to watch our time-shifted match. So we'll see you guys back here just a bit. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. StarCityGames.com Richmond Open Weekend, part of Season 1 of the 2019 SCG Tour. Cedric and Patrick here in the booth. Keep in mind, Brian G and Jerry T are headed in after this round to take you through rounds 11 and 12. But for now, we want to take you through our time-shifted match between Ross Merriam and Jonathan Hobbs.